Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland Forum for Candidates for Multnomah County District Attorney. I'm Debbie Kay, Portland League member and the moderator for this forum. The League is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to making democracy work. We believe democracy works best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. We're presenting this forum to give eligible voters the opportunity to learn more about these two candidates. The League is grateful for the support from the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the Weiss Foundation, the League of Women Voters of Portland Education Fund, and our media partner, Metro East Community Media. Both candidates were invited to participate in this forum. Both candidates are here today. The current District Attorney, Mike Schmidt, and the Senior Deputy District Attorney, Nathan Vasquez. Welcome to you both, and thank you for participating. Under the voter forum protocol agreed to by the speakers for this event, each one will give a 2-minute opening statement, followed by questions that we have prepared that are based on League positions and League members' interests. Speakers will have up to 60 seconds to answer each question, and at the end, they will each have a closing statement. The candidates have previously agreed in writing to comply with these time rules and other requirements. The speaking order will alternate between the candidates, with the first and last speaker being determined by the current random candidate alphabet drawn by the Oregon Secretary of State. And now, let's begin. Mr. Schmidt will give the first opening statement. Mr. Schmidt, you have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. And let me thank the League of Women Voters of Portland for having us. On May 21st, we will decide whether we want to move forward to better days or go backwards. We all want to be safe in our community, and we all want a responsive, fair, and effective criminal justice system. And we all want to emerge from the challenges of the last 4 years better than before. I took office in 2020 amidst a host of unprecedented crises, and I have focused my first term on taking meaningful action to meet those challenges head on. We emerged from social distancing to see open drug use on our streets. I got to work with the legislature to craft new laws to fix Measure 110, adding a new misdemeanor for possession to stop public use, and bringing much needed treatment resources to Multnomah County. We saw local businesses that we loved struggling and sometimes even closing down due to a variety of factors, including crime. I partnered with law enforcement to launch a task force to go after organized retail theft. And now we're turning the tide and catching and prosecuting those harming these businesses. Our neighbors were experiencing car thefts, and these thefts are a major blow. I partnered with police to launch an auto theft task force, and now in 2023, car thefts were down 25.5%. There's progress being made, and there's also so much work to do. We're not done until we all feel healthy and safe in our community. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Here's my commitment to you. I'll tell you what I have done to address the very real challenges we are facing, and I will tell you that what we can do together moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here today. Again, my name is Nathan Vasquez, and I have been a district attorney for the past 23, working on my 24th year. I started as an intern in this office, and I've had the honor of serving this community in really every capacity. I'm the only candidate before you that has taken on very serious crimes such as murder, rapes, robberies. I'm the only one that's been in court prosecuting the Proud Boys, making sure that they were held accountable when they came and assaulted members of our community. I also am a father, and I'm raising 2 wonderful children in this community. I'm a husband to an amazing wife who is currently getting her master's in counseling and victim trauma work. It is with that family in mind that I have stepped forward because I know that we can do better than where we are now. I'm running because I love this community and because I believe we can both deliver compassionate accountability and move to a better place than where we are. Sadly, under our current elected DA, our community has become unsafe. His failed policies, particularly around Measure 110, have led to lots of issues in our community. Mismanagement and broken partnerships have also resulted in record homicides, We've seen traffic deaths go through the roof. There's been a number of problems that our office sadly has failed to meet the challenge with. But I'm here because I know that we can move forward. And specifically, now is the time to select a leader who will prioritize victims first, who will prioritize community safety, and a leader with the actual experience and the proven track record to put together a plan to move us forward. And that's why I'm here and hopeful to talk about that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question goes to Mr. Vasquez. Voters have heard each of you describe the job of district attorney differently, with one stating that outreach and policy work take precedence, and the other saying that administration of the office should have primacy. Please explain your approach and why it is the right one.
Certainly, we need to start with leadership of our office. Sadly, in the last 4 years, we've seen a lack of leadership and lots of problems. Our morale has been really extremely low, and we've seen multiple claims of gender discrimination against the elected DA that have hurt our office greatly. So we must begin with a healthy office, one in which we can lead the men and women of this office in a manner that delivers public safety. Yes, policies are important. Yes, working in the community is important. It's something that I pride myself throughout my career. Certainly, I have a proven track record of excellence when it comes to trial work, but I've also worked hard to develop programs such as the Renew Project and the MAPS Project. These were projects which were specifically designed to connect the community with the criminal justice system and to help us all work together. And it's something that I believe the right combination, when you have the experience behind it, can deliver what we as a community need to move us forward.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, your response.
Yeah, the role of the Multnomah County District Attorney is not even like other district attorneys' offices in this state. It is one of leading an office of 260 people. It's also one of being a leader at the legislature, working with our legislators, working with county commissioners, city commissioners, and even national leaders across the country on issues of policy that are facing our community and other communities. It's a huge distinction in this race. Experience actually does matter. And I've got 10 years of actual managerial experience where my opponent has 0. Trial experience is not something that this job does. The elected district attorney doesn't try cases, hasn't for decades. It's a running the office job, it's a policy job, and it's a job that works with community members to collaborate to work on the biggest challenges facing our community. So there's a big distinction between me and my opponent in that regard.
Thank you. Our second question, first to you, Mr. Schmidt. What is your view of the appropriate relationship of the district attorney's office with the Portland Police Bureau?
The job requires collaboration. We have to work together on a regular basis, obviously, to make cases. Police officers are frequently witnesses on the cases that we prosecute. We work together on initiatives like we have with the auto theft and the retail theft task forces. So it's one of collaboration, but it also has to be one where it's clear that we have different jobs. I am called upon to hold police officers accountable if they commit a crime. It's important that our two agencies follow and do our distinct jobs separately with respect and collaboration for one another, but also with understanding that we're different agencies for a reason. And it's my job to hold officers accountable when they break the law.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, same question.
This is an extremely important relationship, and it's one that sadly we've seen just destroyed in the past 4 years. This has been something that unfortunately the elected DA has not been able to manage, and it was one that he broke early and has never been able to recover from. It's one where we heard from the chief of police having to tell police officers to stop going out into the community and telling them that they couldn't make arrests because the DA wouldn't prosecute. This is a situation where, yes, we absolutely need to hold police officers accountable when they break the law. They should be held to higher standards. But at the same time, they need a trusted leader. And this is one where, yes, law enforcement, first responders, firefighters, police officers, they have endorsed me. And they know that I can be that bond between the community and law enforcement to bring them together, to bring trust and move us forward. And that's where we need to be in this next 4 years.
Thank you. Our next question To Mr. Vasquez, to what extent, if at all, would you change the crime charging practices and philosophy of the district attorney's office?
First and foremost, my goal is to bring forward compassionate accountability. Sadly, under the elected DA, we have seen our overall issuance of cases drop dramatically. And when I'm talking about overall, I'm talking about the total number of cases. There was a time throughout my 20 plus year career where we would do between 12 to 20,000 cases a year. Under DA Schmidt, we've gotten down to under 6,000, and that is post-pandemic. And certainly, while a small portion, or well, a portion of that was under ballot measure 110, which he specifically advocated for and requested and talked about when he campaigned last time about charging less and doing less and not prosecuting nonviolent crimes. That's not my philosophy. I'm a believer in compassionate accountability. And so when it comes to how I'm going to run this office, it's going to be to end this kind of feeling we have right now, which is no rules Portland, and get us back on track.
And Mr. Schmidt, your answer.
Yeah, Nathan's approaches and his policies that he's talked about have been compared to broken windows policing, and those are the policies of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. And we all know where that got us. He talks about wanting to prosecute tens of thousands of more misdemeanors every single year. And he also wants to confuse voters by talking about the total number of cases. Mr. Vasquez knows very well that the prosecutor's office can only charge cases that police officers send to us. And underneath my tenure, we are at a 7 and an 8 year high in terms of the percentage of cases that we are charging, both felonies and misdemeanors. So we are prosecuting a higher percentage of cases that the police sent to us than even pre-pandemic. And so we're looking at the cases where we have evidence, we're moving forward, and that's because we do have a great collaborative relationship with law enforcement who are bringing us the evidence we need so that we can hold people accountable.
Thank you. And Mr. Vasquez.
I answered that question, so are we on to a new question?
I am terribly sorry. I scrolled too quickly.
I'm happy to respond if you'd like. I mean, I have plenty of responses to Mr. Schmidt. But
thank you.
Okay.
To Mr. Schmidt.
I believe it's Mr. Schmidt's.
Indeed it is. Thank you. Please describe your philosophy of the appropriate role for the district attorney's office in sentencing.
The district attorney's office plays a crucial role in sentencing. We advocate to judges for what the final sentence should be. We come up with offers in plea agreements, or we accept offers when those offers are made to us in certain cases, and we determine whether to accept them or not. So we play a big role in sentencing. I think one of the things that I've taken on since being the DA is understanding the historical disparity that our sentencing system has brought in our nation and here in Oregon. We are the most incarcerated planet on Earth, or nation on Earth, and we also have massive disparity in who's being incarcerated. That's why I was really proud to start our Measure 11 diversion court called Step Court that tackles one of the areas where we see the most young Black men being prosecuted and sent to prison in Multnomah County. And we're seeing great results. So that's an example of a district attorney leading with policy on sentencing, and we're getting better public safety results using less incarceration and decreasing disparity in our criminal justice system. Thank
you. Mr. Vasquez?
Yes, I would agree that we play an immense role in the area of sentencing. However, I strongly disagree with DA Schmidt's approach or at least his belief that somehow the STEP program is a model of how we reduce recidivism. Because what happens in that program is we select, and this is something we've been doing, quite frankly, for years, we select those folks that we think are going to be successful on probation, and we put them into a probationary situation as opposed to prison. It's important work, and I'm vowed to continue that. But it's not fair to compare that to the overall recidivism rate with those that go to prison, because sadly, the people that go to prison are often the people that have a long track record of criminal behavior. Now, when we're talking about sentencing, this is another important area, is that you need an experienced DA that's actually dealt with murder cases. We've seen some examples recently where the community has had some really massive concerns over the decisions that the elected DA has made, particularly the case with the taxi cab driver, where it left a lot of questions. And if you have someone with the experience that can explain that to the community and make the proper decisions, we'll be in the best place.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching the video of the Multnomah County District Attorney Candidate Voter Forum or listening to the podcast presented by the League of Women Voters of Portland. Our next question goes first to Mr. Vasquez. What do you suggest should be the 3 most important factors for voters to consider in making their choice between the candidates for district attorney?
One is track record and experience. When we look at that, let's start with that one. And what we're looking at is that, my track record is one of almost 24 years of experience where I have proven results, delivered on cases, have built community relationships versus the track record of the elected DA, which is one of, sadly, many failed policies. We've seen things that have directly damaged our community, like his failed approach on bail reform, which has created a revolving door. We've also then can talk about, the track record of management within the office. That is a key one. And when we look at that, while certainly my role has been one as a supervisor, what I've seen is that those that I have supervised under me have done exceedingly well. They have worked their way up and they support me greatly. My office supports me. And so when we look at that, it's also the support of the office. This is one where the attorneys in my office have specifically chosen to endorse me and not the elected DA.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
Well, I think, I'd start with values. My opponent is a lifelong Republican. He's voted against common sense gun reform measures when he voted against ballot measure 114. I think he's out of step with the values of this community. So you need to look at that. 2, look at the last 4 years. My opponent wants to say, oh, everything that went wrong is Mike Schmidt's fault. And he completely glosses over that every city in the country went through serious challenges. And I'm so proud of the work that the people in my office have done to rise to meet those challenges. We've partnered with OHSU to work on gun violence. We've got task forces up meeting some of our most property crime challenges. We've worked with the legislature to work on catalytic converter theft. So you need a leader who can actually address the things that they are put in front of them because we can't predict the future. And finally, I'd say experience. My opponent has never managed anybody. He's never done HR, budget, any of these things. I've got 10 years both running a state agency and this agency, and it matters. This is a 260-person agency.
Thank you. Oops, excuse me. The League of Women Voters is interested in campaign finance. What weight, if any, should voters give the number of a candidate's financial supporters, the identities of these donors, and the amount of their contributions? Mr. Schmidt?
I think this is crucially important. I think you look at who is supporting who, and that'll tell you a lot about the candidate. I'm very proud that I have almost double the number of contributions as my opponent. The actual numbers of the donations are a lot smaller, the value of the donations, because he's got some of the wealthiest donors in our community. In fact, about 4 individuals are funding over 25% of his campaign. We all know that that kind of money is not healthy to democracy, and it also shows you where his interests are. They're completely downtown. This is for a county job where you got to look at the entire community. And so I'm proud to have supporters from all over our Multnomah County's community-based organizations, other elected leaders. And so I think it is absolutely appropriate. When you look at my opponent's donors, some of these folks have donated to Trump and to other MAGA type interests. So yeah, evaluate who the donors are and why they're supporting the candidate.
Mr. Vasquez, your response.
I would agree it is important. And again, this is a part where DA Schmidt likes to twist the truth around. First and foremost, I'm not a lifelong Republican. I've been out of the Republican Party for years because I did not specifically agree with Trump being a nominee for the Republican Party, and I found it disgusting, quite frankly. And so when we talk about the donors, actually, I have a significant amount. And I don't really trust that number of double because I get donations of 25, $50 just about every single day. And what I have is a donor base of very progressive folks all the way across the spectrum. Even DA Schmidt has a Republican lobbyist on his donor rolls. So when we look at that, we should also consider his giant out-of-state contribution that he got from the Drug Policy Alliance. Now, he took that just days before he decided to flip-flop and then vote for recriminalization. So it is an important fact to look at when we're talking about credibility of the elected DA.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to remind you both that you've both been taken to task by Willamette Week for the research strict veracity of your statements. This is a policy discussion. I encourage you to treat it as such. Our next question to Mr. Schmidt. Were you satisfied with the state legislature's modifications of the 2020 ballot measure 110, which we've addressed to some extent already? Those provisions earlier this year, if not, what additional changes would you support?
I was satisfied. We were intimately involved in working with the chairs of the judiciary committees, of the committee that was put together to address Measure 110. In fact, when I went and testified in support of it, the chair thanked me for my office's participation. Having deflection as the first stop on the continuum where an officer can tell somebody, hey, you can't use those drugs in public, you can't possess those drugs, but we don't have to go to arrest in prison. We can take you to a drop-off center or to another deflection point and get you to the treatment you need. I think that's crucial. But even if that doesn't work, we have conditional discharge for the next step. And if that doesn't work, we have parole and probation, but we also built in automatic expungement. The first time in Oregon, after 3 years, that conviction will be automatically expunged. Collateral consequences were one of the big reasons that I think voters supported Measure 110 in the first place, knowing that those consequences disproportionately impact communities of color. So automatic expungement is a huge deal in this legislation as well.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
What I would say is that it certainly is a step in the right direction. And it's one that, I certainly went down and advocated early on and have been a proponent of change of this from day one. This is not something that, at the last minute, you should be coming in and trying to take credit for. But I will say, here's what was lacking and what I think as a community as a whole, we need to really look at and evaluate is there enough out there for a support network for these individuals that are struggling with substance abuse disorder? As someone who's worked in this field for over 2 decades, what I know is that oftentimes it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And what I'm not seeing currently is enough funding going to all of those resources, such as the parole and probation officers that can help people get to treatment, can help connect them, can help be the resource and the mentors that we need. And that's in all areas. If you go to my website, I have a 6-point plan in which I very particularly put out the areas of support that need to be put forward to help these individuals that are struggling in our community.
Thank you. Our next question to Mr. Vasquez. What is your philosophy on pretrial incarceration?
When it comes to this area, this is where experience matters. Having been actually there in the courtroom day in, day out working, this is an area where our community is particularly struggling right now. There was reform that was put forward by the elected DA under the no cash bail theory. In theory, that's a good idea. The idea being that we don't want to hold people in custody just because they can't afford it. However, its execution has been extremely poor and left massive loopholes, and it's something we need to change. We need to get to a place where actually when people commit new crimes while they're on release for other crimes, they can be held. That's something that sadly in the last 3 years, we haven't seen any effort at all for this change to come about. And we've seen it hurt our community over and over and over. As the elected DA, this is going to be a priority of mine, is to fix the problems that have been created under the current administration and move forward with a policy that really can deal with not just the very extremely violent people, but also the ones that are out committing car theft after car theft after car theft and such.
And Mr. Schmidt, your response.
So the legislature worked to pass Senate Bill 48 after 2 years of studying it in a bipartisan gubernatorial commission because they were afraid that our system of pretrial was unconstitutional. Senate Bill 48 made some much needed fixes to make sure that we didn't overnight find ourselves having people released onto the streets like they have in other places. What has been happening since then in the implementation is we've been working closely with the courts. Mr. Vasquez is either misleading you or doesn't know that we've actually worked with the presiding judge to tighten up the presiding judge order, which is the document that tells the jail who should be held to see a judge or not see a judge. And in that order, it says that if you have been charged or convicted with 3 crimes in the last 3 years, you will be held to see a judge. That's a part of the PJO that my office advocated for and is put into place now. So people are being held when they meet that criteria. But ultimately, that's a judicial decision that happens. My office has worked on some other things too that I'm out of time to talk about, but to tighten that.
Thank you. Our next question to you, Mr. Schmidt. What, if any, effective role can the district attorney's office play in resolving the lack of criminal defense counsel?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's about communication and letting the community know how urgent and what a big crisis this is for our community. From day one, I held press conferences. We've put out every single week press releases to talk about all the cases being dismissed. I talk to the media every chance that I can get because the state legislature is the body that oversees the public defense system. And it needs to be adequately funded, and that oversight has to be put into place so that we make sure that we're getting what the state is paying for with those services. I sat on the legislative bipartisan committee to look at this issue. The Office of Public Defense Services is moving into the executive branch as of January 1st. That's part of the legislation that was passed. I do think that that will help. But ultimately, it's up to the legislature to get this fixed. I've been shouting from the rooftops that that needs to happen and it needs to be funded. But this is a decades-old problem that's come home to roost, not only in our state, but in states around the country, like Washington State right now.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
Sadly, press conferences aren't enough to get this done. We need real action because these are real cases that we're missing out on right now. Victims are not getting justice. And this is a problem that's been around since the switch that was made at the legislature about 3.5 years ago. And there's been no policy efforts put forward to actually make the change. The policy efforts that need to be put forward to actually effectuate change, because what did happen is they put in about $100 million more once there was a crisis, and that didn't change anything. What we need is real accountability and transparency. There are policies that have been written and forwarded to the elected DA that have not been put forward to the legislature, and that will require there to be transparency and accountability with our public defenders on the other side to make sure that they're taking on the cases that need to be handled. And in the short term, I'll also be working hard to see if I can bring forward civil attorneys that are out there right now willing to take cases. Just because it's been tried once and didn't work doesn't mean it can't. And I will always look to overcome those hurdles and obstacles to get the cases through the system and make our system a workable one.
Thank you. Audience members, you are watching the video of the Multnomah County District Attorney Candidate Voter Forum or listening to the podcast. This is presented by the League of Women Voters of Portland. Our next question goes to Mr. Vasquez. What should be the role of the District Attorney's Office in prosecuting law enforcement officers for actions taken in the performance of their duties?
Role should always be one that if an individual breaks the law, and particularly if they're a member of law enforcement, I believe we should be very active in that because of the very fact that I believe that those in law enforcement should be held to a higher standard. It's something that I have said for years that we need body cameras. I'm sad that we sit here today and here we are, one of the largest jurisdiction in the entire state, and we don't have them in the city of Portland. As someone that is trusted by them, I can certainly go to them and say, you need this now. And I'm glad to see that they're on board with that. But what also I would say is, I've had the opportunity to work on multiple cases. And again, this is where experience matters, where an officer has been involved in a use of deadly force. And I know the process, how to work those cases through grand jury. I know how to work with with various other agencies to get that done. And if they break the law, they need to be held accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
No disagreement in terms of accountability, but it is interesting because my opponent was caught on tape actually talking to a group of community members saying that one of the reasons Portland police officers are leaving is because I've been willing to prosecute them when they commit crimes, and insinuating that things would change under him. So it's interesting to hear him talk about this now. Look, I've proven that when police officers commit crimes, that they are going to be charged, they're going to be held accountable. But I also am very proud of the resolution of one of our cases involving a protester where the victim in that case wanted restorative justice. And so we heard her and we were able to get an outside mediator to facilitate that restorative conversation. And we actually ended up dismissing the case against the police officer because what the victim wanted was an apology and a public recognition of the harm that was caused. And so that's a situation where, look, police officers need to be held accountable, but also, they're human beings and they have work to do. So that's been my approach to make sure that we're doing everything we can.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
I'm happy to respond to that. I already did, but I certainly didn't say what Mr. Schmidt said, and I'm happy to go into that as well.
Actually, I do have a further question about the role that restorative justice can and should play in your work.
I believe it is Mr. Schmidt's turn to go first, but I'm happy to go first if you'd like.
It is his turn. Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, what role can restorative justice play in the district attorney's work?
Well, this is an area that I've been a huge advocate for, both at the state level, because you need funding in order to hire the mediators and facilitators who actually do the restorative work, because it doesn't happen in the district attorney's office. And you need a district attorney that's actually willing to implement it and follow the data and the research and the science. We've met with offices from around the country that engage in restorative justice work. We've implemented an adult restorative justice program. We haven't been processing as many cases as we would hope through that program. It is in DA Vasquez's unit, so I'm worried a little bit that it's being strangled. But we're also starting it up in our juvenile department as well. I'm a huge believer, like we used it in about a dozen cases so far. And the research and the data is very clear that you get better public safety outcomes and higher victim satisfaction with restorative justice processes.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, your opinion on restorative justice?
Yes, I am also supportive of restorative justice. However, the current model that it's put forward in, which is only, I think, in the 4 years done 12 cases. So sadly, that's really not even a drop in the bucket. When it's delivered the way it is currently, which is it's only really developed in some of the most violent cases in our community, it doesn't really lend to the idea of delivering restorative justice to the community. There's a huge opportunity here, and it's one that I'm happy to pursue when I'm elected, which is that restorative justice should be brought forward in lots of other areas, such as property crimes, where the victims are on board with the idea, and where we can have some true restorative justice through, repayment of restitution, through community service. There's a lot of opportunity, and when I am elected, I'm going to bring this on a much larger scale than just 12 cases in 4 years.
Thank you. Our next question, starting with you, Mr. Vasquez, what, if any, changes to the district attorney's budget would you support? Please explain your answer.
Well, changes to the budget, certainly I would like to see it grow. I think that probably DA Schmidt and I would agree upon that. What I would say is it's more about delivery of how we utilize our resources. When elected as district attorney, I'm going to actually change around some of it in that I'm a firm believer in strategic prosecution. It's something that I believe should be used and utilized throughout the entire office. Currently, it's limited to my unit, and it's simply not enough. It needs to be something that if we're going to move forward and to do the most efficient and effective use of resources, it's how we would do that. It simply uses data analysts, and prosecutors. It should be in the domestic violence unit. It should be in our felony property crimes unit. It should be throughout the office. And it's something that I intend to do when I'm brought in. As well as I've been collaborative throughout my career in bringing forth resources, whether helping bring forward the position for the Port of Portland or others. I will continue to try to grow the budget for the DA's office.
Thank you. And Mr. Schmidt.
Well, this is an area where you don't just have to ask what I think. You can look at what I've done. When I took over as district attorney in 2020, our budget was around $35 million. Today, it's nearly it's over $50 million. That's the biggest increase in the last 4 years. It's a bigger increase than we saw in the previous 10, 15 years. We went from having 72 attorneys the day I was elected, today having 96 attorneys in our office. So we have grown the office in every way. I'm very proud of that. because it's so necessary to serve our community. And we do need more. Because we've had outside evaluations come in and look at the workload that our office is asked to handle, look at our caseloads, and an outside independent audit found that we need 110 attorneys just to handle the work that Multnomah County currently has to process. And that's only going to go up with the advent of body-worn cameras coming to our cases. So it does need to continue to grow to right size, and I've done that in my first 4 years.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, does your campaign have any personal restrictions on any otherwise legal campaign contributions that a Multnomah County District Attorney candidate may accept?
Self-imposed restrictions, I think what you mean. No, I don't have any self-imposed restrictions. I know that some candidates running for other offices are signing pledges about where they will accept money or not. That's not my approach. I think that we should be inclusive. For example, if a police officer wanted to donate to my campaign, and I have former police officers that have donated to my campaign, I'm not going to say no to that, and wouldn't reject, that type of support. So, no, I don't have any type of very broad categorical restrictions on donations.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
Yeah, again, it's going to be when we're talking about the self-imposed. I'm certainly not going to take money from LaModa like my opponent did before. I don't take money from tobacco. I'm not going to take money from the NRA. I'm also very careful when it comes to individuals that if they've donated large amounts of money to Trump or anything like that, I know that my opponent likes to try to talk about some weird QAnon thing. I have no appetite or interest in that. If someone is wildly out of the spectrum, either on the far right or the far left, I'm not going to be taking their money. And so it's one where, really I look at very direct indications when someone is way outside the bounds of the normal, then I'm going to not be involved. I looked into some of the allegations made by my opponent, and I really found no credibility to it. These were very minor donations made by that then 3 steps removed may be linked. But again, I'm not going to take any money from any major Trump sources or QAnon or anything of that nature as well.
Okay. Our next question to you, Mr. Vasquez. Is there an acceptable minimum level of criminal trial acquittals, in your opinion? And how do you arrive at that standard?
Minimum trial acquittals. I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Could you please repeat that?
You heard it correctly. I did not write this question.
Okay.
Is there an acceptable minimum level of criminal trial acquittals for you? I suppose we could turn it on its side and talk about a minimum level of criminal trial. I've lost the word for the opposite of acquittal.
Okay. I guess when we're looking at that, I mean, of course, I'm always going to be looking at the quality of work that my office is doing. And when we're talking about that, I mean, is it a percentage? That's a tough one to put on. What I'll say is that, having the experience of actually being in trial and working through it, I know that when we're talking about misdemeanors and young attorneys learning, they're going to lose a few more cases. Domestic violence, that's an area where sadly those are very tough cases. I'm never going to put arbitrary numbers out there, but I'm always going to be mindful about making sure that my attorneys are trained very well and making sure that we're doing the best possible work we can.
Right. And Mr. Schmidt, how would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, there's no number or percentage or anything that you'd want to hit. And I think setting any kind of number standards like that might actually incentivize the attorneys to, do their work differently. We want attorneys to take cases to trial that they believe that they can prove. And sometimes, cases are very hard to prove for different reasons. And sometimes that happens at trial. We wouldn't want them to shy away from doing, bringing those cases to trial when they believe that they have the evidence to secure a conviction. So it's not something that you would want to put a quota or a number on.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Schmidt, is the civil commitment process working as it should? And if not, what reforms would you suggest to improve it?
It's definitely not working as it should. I mean, I think the biggest reform right away is we don't have the civil commitment placement capacity that we need. And it's really a tragedy because, civil commitments they're civil, they're not criminal in nature. And so what we see happen if people can't be held civilly, but they're dealing with challenges where they're unable to care for their basic needs, or they're a danger to their self or others, it can then ultimately end up in some sort of a criminal arrest if those issues are left unattended. So I think not having a civil commitment system working the way it should actually can lead to the criminalization of more people suffering from mental illness. We desperately need more resources. We're under a federal order by a judge to when people need to leave the state hospital. This is an area the legislature desperately needs to take up.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
Well, a couple of things. First, I don't think a lot of folks know this, that actually the district attorney's office, we play a role in this. We go into court and we are the ones that, when a case comes before the court, there is a defense attorney assigned to the person that's allegedly to be mentally ill, and there's some evaluators there as well. And then the district attorney's office is in there advocating. Currently, the standards are really of such a nature because of the way the case law has evolved and the way the laws are written, that it's extremely hard to get someone held in committed. Now, I would agree that we are lacking resources greatly, but this is not a new problem, and it's one that we need advocacy 4 years ago, and we need it now. But more than ever now. And so it's one, as the elected DA, this is going to be a policy that's going to be critical. I want to change some of the laws around this to help our community be as healthy as possible, but also advocate for those resources to really move us forward.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, our next question. What, if any, citizen oversight of the district attorney's office would you support?
I support oversight in all different types of areas. Certainly, we have citizens that help us, draft our budgets and look at some of our policies. Those are areas in which I am very supportive of. Having citizens, of course, come into the grand jury process and review the cases. That's something that is vital to how we operate, and having a healthy and robust grand jury system. And also, a big piece of that is looking at how that grand jury system reviews things such as our correctional facilities. That's a key component of the grand jury process. It's one that I have questions about, and I want to see that do better because we have struggled with our local corrections. We've seen a lot of overdose deaths, and we haven't seen a robust process there to really evaluate that. And it's one that I find that as the elected DA, I welcome citizen oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Well, my opponent just listed off the two things that are required by law and by the county. But I've been proud since being the district attorney that we don't just settle for the bare minimum. I have two other community advisory boards that advise me in the policies that I do. We have a policy advisory board that works with my policy director of external community-based organizations and other stakeholders, and they can submit policy recommendations to our office. For example, they submitted an immigration neutral consequences policy. We worked with immigration lawyers in the Latino network, and we drafted a policy that now my office follows, where my attorneys are directed that where it's possible to avoid immigration consequences and we can still achieve justice and get the conviction that's appropriate for the case, they are to do that. That came from our community oversight board with the policy committee. I also have one that oversees our justice integrity unit, the community advisory board that looks at all of our applications for what we call 819 applications, our resentencing. So this is an area where you can actually see that we've done a lot of work.
Thank you. This is our last question before your closing comments. What impact, if any, can the district attorney's office have on the homelessness crisis in our county? Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. So, this is an area where I think you need to be careful because criminalizing homelessness obviously is unconstitutional as of now, and also not effective. Putting people in jail is our most expensive housing option, and it's our least effective. I'm very proud that I'm partnering with right now 8 local community service providers. We went down to San Diego. We saw how they handle this issue. They have the homelessness court. They've been operating for decades. We're going to bring that here to Portland. We're already drafting the MOUs between us and those service providers, and it kind of flips the old dynamic on its head. What it does is that when somebody's engaging with these service providers and they're doing the hard work that they need to do, whether it's addiction, mental health, or whatever they're seeking, those service providers can write to my office and say, this individual is doing what they should do. And we can reduce the barriers that are in their way to achieve being housed. So conviction expungements, fines and fee forgiveness, even helping people get their driver's licenses are all things that we can do to help people get housed.
Thank you. And Mr. Vasquez.
This is a critical area for our community, and it's one in which I'm very focused on. I've already been out meeting with providers and looking at the pathways to get people off of the street and into housing. And it's one in which, it takes someone with the experience of actually having worked with individuals that are experiencing, being houseless. And it's one in which we have to actually look at that population and see how incredibly complex and diverse that population is. There are individuals that are suffering from substance abuse disorder. There are individuals that it's a purely economic issue. There are a lot of them that have lost their support network. And all of it, certainly, the way the law is written now, we are not to be criminalizing that. And what I've been a proponent of is to say, actually, what this community needs is an actual plan moving forward that includes a true system and network that will tell us and show us where housing is available so that officers on the street can help connect individuals and our service providers can connect individuals to available housing. We don't have that yet.
Thank you. I appreciate your answers and that you have been careful about time. This is now the time that you may give your closing statements, and you each have 2 minutes. Mr. Schmidt goes first. Please go ahead.
Well, thanks again to everyone for being here. Thank you to our moderator, Debbie Kay, and to those watching this at home, and thanks to my opponent for participating. I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 boys. My family lives right here in Portland, and I love this community. And I want to see it emerge from the challenges of the last few years stronger, safer, and healthier. Since my election in 2020, I've built back a DA's office that had been ravaged by decades of budget cuts. I've increased office capacity and our prosecution rates year over year, every single year since taking office. When we saw gun violence rise during the pandemic, we launched a new homicide unit to dedicate more capacity to prosecuting violent crime. And we launched an innovative new partnership with OHSU to get ahead of the issue and look at crime prevention. This is about making sure that we can all live free from the fear of gun violence, and our work isn't over until we get there. I'm working on launching a brand new diversion program to help survivors of domestic violence move forward. Multnomah County needs to be a place where every woman, every child, every person knows that when they need help getting safely away from an abusive situation, the resources are going to be there to help them. We're building a program to address homelessness, which I just talked about. We will partner with service providers and help people expunge their records to reduce homelessness and housing insecurity. I'm also working to expand our groundbreaking step court diversion program, which is showing better success at rehabilitation than jail time has. And we need to help people change their behavior so they won't commit more crimes in the future. And I'm partnering with lawmakers and law enforcement to stop public drug use and get people off the streets, but into treatment. We need steady leadership in the district attorney's office that can meet the challenges we face and move us forward. We can't go backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, and I do appreciate my opponent's participation here today. Portland's best days are ahead of us if we elect the correct leaders. We are at a critical time in Portland's history, and the time for change is now. We've endured over 3 years of rampant crime that's been out of control. Sadly, we've seen record homicide rates. We've seen in this year alone that Portland has had more homicides combined than Seattle and San Francisco. So we are in a situation where we're having windows smashed in businesses. We've lost residents and businesses because of some of these out of control issues. There are 2 paths before you. One path is lined, that Mr. Schmidt has taken us down, is lined with multiple allegations of discrimination, gender discrimination, and sadly, failed policies and rampant crime. My path forward offers one of hope. one that through collaboration, working with various system partners, including not only the law enforcement community, but our everyday community-based organizations, bringing them together to bring forward real solutions, as I have done for the past 2 decades. It is through this experience, collaborative effort, that we can move forward. I'm asking you to join me because I'm here to tell you that on this collective journey, we have to build a compassionate justice system where accountability matters, where victims matter, where we can be compassionate, but yet all of us can enjoy safety. And I know that the people that are here today want that vision. And I hear in the community every day, our community wants to move forward. It's time to step forward into a new direction. And that's what I offer. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you both for being here. This concludes our voter forum with the candidates for Multnomah County District Attorney. We thank each of them for their participation. Audience members, please share this forum recording and podcast with your family and friends. We all need to be informed voters. If you are registered to vote by April 30, you should receive your ballot by May 6th. As with all Oregon elections, most voters will participate by mailing in their ballots, although in-person voting is available. You may check your Multnomah County voters pamphlet online or the paper copy when it arrives by mail at your address. To be counted, ballots must be postmarked Tuesday, May 21st at 8 p.m. You can also find an official ballot drop box location near you by checking www.vote411.org or a Multnomah County voters pamphlet. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit membership organization. We hope this forum was meaningful for you. We welcome you to join or contribute at lwvpdx.org. This is Debbie Kay for the League of Women Voters of Portland. Thank you for watching and listening and for being an informed voter. Remember, your vote counts.